Good evening. August is still here, and the Brattleboro Selectboard is coming up next year on BCTV. Among the items of discussion tonight, the Board as Water and Sewer Commissioners will take a look at additional proposed project changes to the wastewater treatment plant upgrade, and they will be asked to approve a construction phase engineering contract for the Spring Tree Pump Station upgrade. More discussion of the town's social media policies and further discussion of a proposed moving of stop signs at the Citizens Bridge in Guilford Street to Guilford Street and the entrance to Living Memorial Park. The town will hear its year-end financial report from Town Finance Director John O'Connor, plus the monthly financial report. Members of the Development Review Board are scheduled to be on hand to discuss their work and committee operations. In addition, the board will be asked to approve a tentative contract agreement between the town and United Steelworkers Local 944, representing the Public Works and Recreation and Parks departments. Bid award for a Department of Public Works dump truck, a Department of Public Works pickup truck, a grant application for a dry hydrant grant at the intersection of Ames Hill Road and Abbott Road. In addition, the board will be asked to accept and appropriate a grant from the Governor's Highway Safety Program for the purchase of additional traffic safety enforcement equipment. The grant application for enhancing pedestrian safety along Western Avenue will be discussed, plus a presentation from the Town Energy Committee on solar photovoltaic energy systems. Sounds like a new generation of solar energy. And Energy Committee assignments will be discussed as well by the board. Stay with us. The Brattleboro Select Board is next here on BCTV. Thank you for watching.
Good evening, and welcome to our second regularly scheduled meeting, August 21st. And I'd like to know if the meeting has been officially warned.
Yes, it has.
Yes, thank you. And I would accept a motion on the minutes for August 6th, which was a special meeting on Monday.
Move to approve the minutes from August 6th.
Any additions, corrections, deletions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5-0. And a motion on the minutes for our first regularly scheduled meeting, August 7th.
I move to approve the minutes from August 7th as presented.
Again, any additions, corrections, deletions? Yes, Dora?
I have one. Second page, second paragraph in the skate park design, the last sentence.
What page?
The second, or I guess it's the third page, sorry. Second paragraph, last sentence. I propose to change Wendy Krieger, addressed to Wendy Krieger, expressed her concerns. That's it.
Okay. All those in favor of the minutes amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Thank you. Chair's remarks, only a few here this evening. I can't believe summer's over. School starts a week from tomorrow. I bet all those kids are happy about that. Would like to congratulate Commonwealth Yogurt, which took first place in a national Greek yogurt competition. And they were first in 2 categories. Actually, last night they were before the DRB. They are 4 years ahead of schedule in terms of expansion. And the good news is when we did our agreement with them, they talked about providing 25 jobs. They are up to 100 jobs that they are providing. And that's good news for Brattleboro and the surrounding community. So congratulations to Commonwealth Yogurt. That's all I have. Barb, I know you're sitting in a different place over there for a couple of minutes.
Yep.
your comments?
Yeah, just a couple of things quickly. One is on August 9th, there was a committee orientation that was led by the select board member Ken Schneck and some of the folks that he works with Marlborough College. It was really well attended by new committee members, by committee chairs, and everyone left with a kind of a new handbook for committee members, and that's been then distributed to other members of the various committees, and it was great. It was the first time we've had the opportunity on that kind of broad basis to get some of that information out and to actually do a little orientation for people who are new to town government. And so thank you very much for all the planning and all the work that went into that. And the board has one thing they can knock off their to-do list. That was one of your goals. The 28th, next, what is that, Tuesday, is the 1-year anniversary of the Tropical Storm Irene. I did receive an email today that the interfaith clergy, they will be doing candlelight vigil on Tuesday the 28th at 6:30 p.m. That will be at the Commons. They're going to, it's going to be a short event. They're going to thank, kind of acknowledge some of the responders. They're going to acknowledge some of the citizens and volunteers and the various agencies that came into play during and after the storm. They're going to do some closing words, and then at 7 p.m. across the state, church bells will ring, and that will be the closing of the ceremony. So I just got that today, and there'll be more coming out on that. And finally, I said I would keep this brief. Could I get the lights for a second? There's been a group of town employees that first met actually with Ken Schneck, and Ken had concerns about our website, and we did some improvements after his work. We then got a committee of people together, and I'm going to acknowledge these folks because they tend not to get as much acknowledgement as they deserve, and they've done just a huge amount of work on totally revamping the website. It is not live yet. It will be live tomorrow. We're hoping by 3 o'clock. So that should so people can have time to look at it then. I just wanted to quickly show some of the changes. The folks on this committee were Callista Carbonell out of the Finance Department, Jane Fletcher from the Town Clerk's Office, Julia Perks from the Planning Department, and Jesse Cudworth from the Rec and Parks Department. And I cannot tell you how much additional work these folks did. What the goal was to move from a website that was just really kind of a cut and paste website that gave some information, wasn't as easy. We've got a lot of people talking about it wasn't easy to find thing. It was a minimum of sometimes 4 to 6 clicks to get to where you wanted to be. And what we've moved to is an overall kind of Brattleboro website. The pictures that are on here are all pictures that are of Brattleboro. Most of the pictures were actually taken by our engineering technician, Gary King. So what we have in one of the first tabs is our doing business. It talks about the business license application. The directory that's been made up from those folks has direct links to the chamber, to building a better Brattleboro, and to other economic development organizations. Living and learning we have all the arts and culture, the library, bus service, etc. They're moving here. What you'll see is you'll have people, and notice that all the pictures change. That talks about what to do if you think if you're interested in moving here. Sports and recreation. We talk just not only about the recreation departments, but how do you get a hunting and fishing license, water sports, those types of things, and then festivals and events. One of the things that you will note is that it's a much less cluttered page. That was one of the main goals, is to not have a lot of clutter. The calendar, which used to be at the bottom side, now is just a big icon at the bottom, and it brings up the full page, which is a lot easier to look at. Again, anything, we used to have, the process used to be, wow, anything new, we put it just on the front page, right in the middle. And then you end up with a long list of things. We now have a news section, and you can hit it from this way, or if you're on the actual home page, it's also just down on the right-hand side. One of the comments we've gotten about is kind of, how we were grouping things together. They've changed how things are grouped with serving the community. So under serving the community, you see boards and committees. The Justice Center Representative Town Meeting has its own little place now, which it did not have before. And again, when you go to this first site, it just tells you about what Representative Town Meeting is. Again, very easy. And then you'll notice to the right, you have the minutes and all the members. How may we help you? We have a variety of building and zoning information, property assessment, roads and bridges. We used to have a little thing that said documents. Now we have charter, ordinance, and policies, much better organized. License and permits are here. Emergency services, we've taken some of those, so instead of just showing some of the departments, we talk about fire, the hospital in town, the police department, flood hazard information, Rescue Inc., and then the signing up for the Brattleboro Emergency Notification System. Departments, again, have their own area, and then contact us. So, what they have tried to do, and again, you want to make sure they get all the credit for this, is have really tried to make this a place where people can go for information about Brattleboro, and I think they've done a great job. One of the other little features down here is maps. We'll continue to have more information on maps as we continue to use and create more maps, but you can see on the light we have our trails, our firearm safety, building locations, parking lots that people can find, and a variety of other pieces of information. So I just wanted really quickly, and comments section, feedback form is right there. People can give us some feedback. One of the things that's really different about this that you don't see when you're looking at it is it had been in the prior site. Maybe there was an article that fit both under a department, plus it also fit under maybe another header of committees. Right now, this allows us to set it up in such a way so that if we have such a document, we can, we post it once and it goes to the other areas. That will enable us. What we have found prior is that you would have, if you updated a document, you updated an ordinance, you had to make sure you updated it in a couple different places. This takes all the guesswork out of that, so it should be more up-to-date, efficient. And again, boo-hoo, congratulations to that committee. Some of the things are they're still tweaking. You'll notice sometimes fonts are a little funny in a couple places. We're still giving feedback to the programmer on that. We're also still giving some feedback to a couple other things so if you find something maybe that isn't working, use the feedback form and let folks know. But I hope that people use it, enjoy it. If for no other reason, the pictures are lovely. So that is all I have. Thank you for indulging me.
Christopher?
Yeah, I had a question, Barb. There was an icon bill pay. Can you talk about that?
Oh, that is the, that you can turn the lights back on. That is the system that we use for, if people want to use pay by a credit card, people can now pay water, sewer, parking tickets,
Taxes, business licenses, town clerk fees.
Yeah. Most things that we have, we still have some that cannot be paid by credit card, but we're trying to get everything over to the credit card, to being able to accept credit cards. It's not a free service because there's a charge for people that's by the second party user to do it. So there are some people who may still prefer to come in and pay by check, and we still are one of the few places that will accept cash.
Very good. Select Board Committee reports. Are there any? Yes, David.
Traffic Safety Committee had a special meeting 2 weeks ago tomorrow, and we've made some significant progress with respect to responding to some of the concerns about pedestrian and bicyclist safety, so I wanted to report about those. We've decided essentially to address hotspots first, and then to work on a broader plan on traffic calming measures and other traffic and pedestrian safety matters. So addressing the hotspots in the order in which we dealt with them at the meeting, we've decided to broaden the crosswalks in front of Academy School in West Brattleboro. Those are being restriped before school begins next week. And we're also going to be making sure that the lines of sight heading into the crosswalks in the parking areas and no parking areas are broad enough to make sure that there's enough room to see as you step out into the crosswalk. In addition, one of the items you're going to see on tonight's agenda is a grant application for scoping work in the entire West Brattleboro area running from Greenleaf Street through Academy School. A similar scoping study, I think it may actually be coming up on the agenda soon, has to do with Canal Street and broadening the crosswalk and investigating the possibility of a pedestrian island at the hospital so that there'll be better safety for students going to the high school and to Oak Grove School. We're going to be putting in a grant application to try to raise funds to put in a traffic table, I think it's called, in front of Memorial Park in the crosswalk area in an effort to reduce the speed of traffic coming to and going from Memorial Park. I expect later we'll be withdrawing the motion relating to the stop signs in that area, but we are going to be seeking funding for a speed table in that area. Also, there's been other restriping going on. There's restriping going on at Bullock Street and Whipple Street to better define the travel lane in those areas and to try to reduce speed of traffic going through those residential neighborhoods. Also, it's my understanding that V-Trans was supposed to come through last week or this week, although I haven't been there in the last week or two, and restripe the bicycle lanes on Putney Road. So
Has not been done as of yesterday.
well, they had said they were going to do it soon, so we certainly encourage V-Trans to come and do that work before it gets wiped away over the winter. So those are the steps that we're taking in the short term to respond to some of those traffic-related and pedestrian and bicycle safety-related concerns, and then we're going to be turning our attention to a broader plan of what types of traffic calming devices we're going to recommend in other areas in town. I also would announce that Governor Shumlin is going to be touring the state this coming Saturday and August 25th. He'll be here in Brattleboro at 11 o'clock at the Whetstone Studio for the Arts on William Street for a community-wide commemoration of issues and our recovery from Tropical Storm Irene. So everybody's invited to attend that event as well.
Very good, thank you. Dora?
Wyndham Regional Commission, I attended the special meeting that they had last week on the bridge design for the I-91 bridge over Route 30. Really great meeting, very well attended. Just want to congratulate the staff of Wyndham Regional Commission for facilitating a really good meeting in which there turned out to be a lot of agreement about what people would like to see in the bridge, and we'll wait and see what happens with the state's response, V-Trans response to the outcomes of that meeting. And the regularly scheduled meeting for Wyndham Regional, which normally would be August 28th, has been moved to September 11th because of just giving people the opportunity to be able to participate in commemorations of for Tropical Storm Irene. We realized that was the anniversary. So it's been moved to September 11th. It will be at the Wilmington Town offices. And just, can we get David already brought up because I was going to ask what was going on with the governor's visit, but there's also the Vermont Telecommunications Authority is doing that meeting tomorrow, which is supposed to be a Brattleboro Guilford meeting, at Hernan meeting. Is there any, do we have any participation as a town in that meeting?
Patrick has been working with them to set that up. They didn't really,
Yeah, Karen
with the
Marshall
exception of space.
contacted us and was seeking a proper location where they could hold a meeting. She's going to be outlining some progress that the Connect Vermont and the VTA have on a number of projects that are affecting the region. And so she was seeking a location and is going to be conducting that meeting here tomorrow. I'll certainly be here and encourage anybody else to come and attend and find out what's going on.
5:30, right, here
Yep.
in this room?
Mhm.
Thank you. Thursday, yes.
Today's Tuesday all day, so tomorrow.
Yes. Sorry.
Don't be sorry.
All set?
Yep.
Anyone else? Good. Public participation. Here's an opportunity for you to speak about something that is not on our agenda here. It looks like as I view the audience, everyone in attendance this evening has an item on the agenda, but you're still able to participate in public participation. Seeing none, we don't have anything as liquor commissioners. I'll accept a motion to go into water and sewer commissioners.
Move to convene as Water and Sewer Commissioners.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? 5-0. We are water and sewer commissioners.
Steve Barrett was unable to attend tonight due to having to be out of town. There are several, in addition to the monthly update on the project, which is, as of July 31st, approximately 81% project time has elapsed, and approximately 87% of the construction contract has been completed. The board at this meeting is being asked to take two different action items. The first is to authorize 8 proposed project changes. This is a total dollar amount of $18,714. Those are actually combined of project changes that were under the $5,000 value, that have both some increases and some decreases in there, and then also one change that was over 5,000, and that is $6,381, and that's to include the addition of a 30A circuit breaker and other electrical and mechanical changes that are associated with the digester gas treatment skid. The other changes is for folks who might be interested. There is a credit for not installing shelves in the control building workroom, and that was about a $230 decrease. There's an increase of a little over $1,000 for the level control building's women's bathroom floor. $4,531 increase for the second clarifier handrail infills. It's about a little over $6,500 for the digester building boiler room breaching modifications, gas holder, digester tank liquid overflow configurations, which is an increase of $4,472. A decrease of $4,250 to delete the poly vapor barrier at the spray foam, and an increase of $3,161 for the added blocking at the control building exterior windows. So all in all, that would be a change of an adder of $18,714. As I've said, we are with these changes, we still have not utilized any of the 5% contingency that we have, and we are looking to not do that.
I would accept the motion on the first item.
I move to authorize the 8 proposed project changes at a total dollar amount of $18,714, and to authorize the town manager to sign any corresponding change orders.
Further discussion? Yes, Dave.
Quickly, Barb, I have a question. Did you have any discussion with the engineer or the contractor about the likelihood that we're going to be facing additional change orders that will be adders rather than reducing the cost of the project, and what do we anticipate going forward as the project comes to a close?
I have not had the opportunity, but due to vacations and people being out of the office, to have the conversation directly with Gene Forbes, but that will be something I will be doing. And because as one of the things that we've talked about is to make sure we've been doing really well right now. That contingency isn't free money. We still have to kind of borrow and pay that. And so there's a real, really urgency to not use that contingency.
And we're $1 million short on the fund itself, borrowing the money, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so
Correct.
I agree with David that there definitely needs to be a contractor in terms of adders this late in the ballgame.
And we could, what you have noticed is that they're bringing project changes to you almost at each meeting now, which I think is good, so that there's a more immediate review. And if that is, if we do see this as an issue, it would probably help to have the engineering firm here.
Further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Thank you.
Okay, the next thing then is, as the board is aware, each time there is a new kind of phase to this project that's done, there's also an amendment to the construction engineering contract. And so with at the July 17th meeting, the board approved a contract with Sherburne Consolidated of Amesbury, Mass. For construction of the Springtree Pump Station. The engineering fees associated with that for the design and final design review, etc., are now before the board. You're asked to approve an amendment in the amount of $97,792 for services related to the Springtree Pump Station. As I said in the administrative report, I hadn't spoken with staff representatives from DEC yet for feedback on that proposal. John O'Connor did have a conversation with
Mike Carey.
Wow, I just blanked on his name. Sorry, thank you. With Mike Carey, who had no comments. This work is actually not part of the revolving loan fund work. It's part of the loaned money. So he did not have any feedback on this. It is, however, within the allowable percentages of engineering work for projects.
Okay. A motion, please.
Is this money that we've already raised by the bonds?
This is, yes, it is part of the proposed project.
Well, then I move to approve the construction phase engineering contract in the amount of $97,792 for services related to the Springtree Pump Station upgrade.
Further discussion?
Yeah, I'm just a little confused.
It's a typo. It's $70,292. If that's the confusion.
No.
All right.
There you go.
I just didn't quite understand why we had such a large amendment. I just didn't get it when I was reading the papers. 97,000.
It's how engineering, it's how once the project is initially, so all of this work has been, for the engineering for the wastewater treatment plant was done. And as we got to different phases, so initially we had a contract for the preliminary design. We then had an amendment to that contract for the final design. We then had another amendment to that contract for the construction. The same is true with this pump station project. So there was the initial engineering contract for the preliminary design for the pump station. That actually, there was changes to how that pump station was determined to be done. This is an amendment, again, to that as we enter into the construction phase of that project.
Because there were additional needs, is that the story?
There actually
It's a
was
separate
not.
project.
There was not in the original engineering contract with the Spring Tree Station. It was only for the design.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't any monies associated in that contract for the engineering work that happens during construction. Those are done as amendments.
Nice.
It's the way the contracts are done.
Okay.
That
Thanks.
typically for an engineering contract, it gives, essentially what it does is it gives the town the authority at any point in time to say, we're going to go out to bid for a new engineering company, because particularly, and that is a decision that happens between preliminary design and final design. Typically, when you go from final design to construction, you would rarely see a change in engineering companies at that point. You might, but you rarely do because it has such an increase in the cost.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the amount of $97,792. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Thank you. I'll accept the motion to adjourn as Water and Sewer Commissioners.
Move to adjourn as Water and Sewer Commissioner.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Unfinished business.
Social media policy, at the July 17th meeting, I was not here, but I did watch the primer on social media that was given by board member Ken Schneck, giving the board a little bit more information on what social media, how it works, what it is, what are some of the options. There was then some discussion about the Vermont League of Cities and Towns model policy, and I believe a lot of that discussion at that time, at that meeting, tended to go be about the social networking moderator. After listening to that discussion and going back, looking at the model policy, I'm presenting to the board just a few changes in here, some for just clarification, some just to make it a little bit easier to read. So I added the definition of town manager, so that wherever you saw town manager, it said town manager or his or her designee, so you didn't see that extra verbiage each time. And under the town social networking moderator, and again, this was an individual who, by this definition, designated by the town select board to monitor, manage, and oversee social media content. What I put in there was, unless otherwise determined by the select board, the town manager would serve in this capacity. And various reasons I have for this. One is that the town manager, by this policy, is responsible for approving who has the authorization to put up sites, what kind of sites they may have, etc. To have someone outside of the social networking moderator, have someone outside kind of overseeing and making decisions about whether some of the content should come down or not, seemed a little convoluted as to how that... Typically, if the department heads or the staff liaison to a committee is really, via this policy, responsible for, ensuring, looking at that website, making sure it's being utilized correctly. As those people report to me, it seemed to make more sense to have a clearer process that if there's something to be taken down, it would be the town manager's role. That then also allows there that if there might be, say, someone, the policy doesn't currently call for that, but say someone wanted to appeal that decision, this would allow them to always appeal up to the select board. If you have a separate person out there, it seemed a little fuzzy about what the chain of command was. The other reason is if something inappropriate is done on a town-affiliated social media site, aren't you folks always going to be kind of looking at me and saying to yourselves, well, how'd that happen? And if you're going to be looking at me, I'd prefer them to have the responsibility of being the person to make that decision. Or don't look at me, I'm okay with that one too. The other reason that, so that's part of my reason. With regard to the amount of time that would take, doesn't take very long to look at Facebook pages, those types of things, doesn't take very long. And you would be amazed how quickly I hear about something being amiss. That tends to travel pretty quickly. So I don't see it as taking a whole lot of time. One of the things that I did add, so that's my reasoning behind that change. Under the account management, I added in here the establishment, type of media, and use by town officials. And again, town officials being kind of this broad definition of town social media sites, subject to the approval of the town manager. Why I added that was because I think just as important as the okay to have a Facebook page or something, I think it's just as important to have that type, which is goes back to the idea of whether as from the primary, you've learned that there's you can be friend, you can like, or you can have a group. I really don't think there should ever be a group Facebook page, because groups are invited, and I don't think that makes sense. These are all town. These should all be public. The other thing where I get concerned, where my and this is the next edition that I have, my bigger concern isn't about somebody putting up something inappropriate. It's easy to take something down. My big concern is how are we complying with Vermont Public Records Law. Vermont Public Records Law is such that, this is all public. This could all be requested. A public records request could come in and say, I want to see everything that was on the town Facebook page that talked about, I'm looking at Mike DeCossium, so I'm just going to say it, Mike DeCossium, fire chief. How is information on those Facebook pages being compiled and saved? So that's one of the things I put in here is request for the establishment of a town social media site should include a written plan for complying with the Vermont Public Records Law. If there are ways of doing it, you can print, you can things. But even that goes back to that social media moderator person. If something comes down, doesn't mean it was never there. It was always there. So it always has to be maintained as a record. This is one of the reasons, this is one of the reasons municipalities and government are slower to utilize Facebook and social media than other private industries, because of the higher, if I sell canoes, and I have a Facebook page, nobody's going to come back and say, 2 years ago you had something on your Facebook page, I'd like to see that. They could for us. And so we need to be, that's also one of the reasons, just to be very upfront with the board, I think that we need to be, one of the biggest decisions, I think, of approving a social media site, for me, will be whether comments are allowed or not.
Comments by whom?
By the public. If there are, you can provide the ability for commenting. You could also provide the ability for there to be the comments to only be messages that go to the administrator of the site, and then there's a response back that can either be on the page. Are you going to use the site for both pushing information out and pulling information in? Are you going to use it for pushing information, just pushing information out? I think those are some pretty big questions that need to be addressed, and I think there are some reasons, and it goes back to the idea of why are people using the sites, and what's the point of the site, and that's not to that's not to diminish trying to have a discussion, but really, are you ever having a real discussion on a social media site?
Mm-hmm. You know, a thread would be a lot different from a discussion or a
You can have
debate.
a thread.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that ability to bring in comments should always be available, to take comments through a message. And that's not to say that there wouldn't be times when there would be, when it will make sense for a Facebook page or whatever to have both information going out and information coming in. There may be times when that makes sense. And I'm only saying that not to clutter up the discussion, but just so that there's a realistic understanding of the things that I would be, if this policy is implemented, things that I would be looking at as we're making those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Comments? Dora?
Couple of things. When we had the discussion the last time, we talked about whether or not boards or committees should actually even have a Facebook site. Personally, I have concerns about the idea of an entity that, one, is a majority decision-making body, so it's an appointed, or it's an appointed entity, and so it's a majority decision-making body, and who's, because anything coming out really should come from the town departments and not from the board itself, the committee. So if there's something that's coming from a committee, should it come through a town department so that, because you get into a lot of politics that are beyond even open meeting law when you start talking about a majority vote entity. So you have seven members, 4 of them voted for something, 3 of them didn't vote for something, and then that gets posted on Facebook. Is it posted just, this is the decision of this body? Or, I think that that's something to really talk about, because I think that you can, particularly committees that are not, it's one thing when they have statutory, guidelines as to what kind of committee they are. But we've got a lot of ad hoc committees out of there. We have a lot of standing committees that have very specific duties, but it's still a town committee, and it's still a select board, and the select board is ultimately the ultimate decision maker as to what that committee is doing. So I have concerns about the idea of allowing a committee to have a Facebook page without it being a staff, without it being a town department entity being overseen by a town department.
Ken?
But if the committee adheres to this policy, then we don't have a problem. And so that's what we're looking at. The whole point of this is to make everything that we are all doing in the town, committees, town staff, everybody, more accessible. That's the whole point of it. And I think those limitations that Barb expressed are perfectly legitimate, and not taking comments is absolutely fine. There are different ways to do that. That's why the website has a comment section on it. We don't disable the ability for citizens to provide comments. We welcome it, we encourage it, but there's certain ways that we want it to happen so it can be archived. The Town Arts Committee having their own page so that they can advertise things that are coming up, upcoming agenda items, things like that, totally appropriate, and makes what we're doing so much more accessible. So I think that if the committees follow the guidelines, that's why everything that Dora just said articulates the need for a social media policy.
David?
You go ahead.
Well, the issue I don't think it's an issue, but any committee, they have discussions about a lot of issues, but if they're proposing something, then it has to come to the select board. So I think that whatever votes that they take about doing something, they may vote on something that they want to bring forth to the select board, and you're right, the select board is the final arbiter. So there's a lot of things that happen in various committees or ad hoc committees that we're not aware of. I don't know what their agendas are, And so if they have a page, then I might be more apt to be able to follow what they're doing. I'm not crazy about committees getting into discussions about topics that they're discussing, but I agree with them taking comments from the public about the topics they're discussing. David?
There's a lot in this proposed social media policy. There's a clear perspective about the way business will be run. There's a clear perspective about very substantial obligations that we would have to be taking on in connection with social media use by the town. And I can walk through some of those at this point because I have concerns about the way this is written. I've studied it quite a bit. But I want to talk a little bit about process for doing that. And I also want to talk about what we're doing in the interim. And so I'm going to begin there. And then maybe I'll address specific concerns, maybe I won't. First of all, I don't know if anybody else has got specific concerns relating to the policy that's been proposed, if we've gone through it. But I think we have to find a way to gather all of that up and work through it, and I'm not sure that a regular select board meeting is the place to do that. It could be a special work group meeting, it could be individual comments being provided over to the town manager to be collected and responded to with a revised draft. But I want to make sure that everything is gathered in an efficient way. So I want to talk about the process for revising this thing. Second of all, it is my understanding, based on what Ken explained 6 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, that there are committees and departments that have Facebook pages now and other are using social media now. And clearly there are public records law and public meeting law issues that can be implicated by the use they're making of those sites now. And I wonder whether those things should be shut down in the interim until we've got a policy that's in place and they can adhere to them. Because I'm concerned about content being generated by the town and not being preserved and not being available under the public records law. And I'm concerned about discussion going on, that it could be subject to the public meeting law that's not being properly shared in the public. So that was a process, and what do we do in the interim question, and I'm not sharing the substance of my concerns yet. How do we want to deal with that?
Well, I'm not so sure. I don't think that we need to shut down the web pages that exist now. I mean, if the town manager has a concern about the preservation of what's happening on those web pages, then I guess maybe I might change my mind. I don't know how active those pages are, if at all. I'm certainly willing, although I'd like to hear from Christopher and Ken and Dora, how they feel about the potential for what Dave just discussed in terms of a work session. And I would agree that this probably will take more time than we want to give it right here at this point. Ken or Christopher?
Yeah, I think David has a really good point about the process here, because we're talking about wrapping our arms around a new phenomenon that we have not, as a society, really understood all that well in how it affects the democratic process. And so I think that the more we study this, the better. And it's an opportunity now to do the job right the first time. So I'm heartily in favor of following David's suggestion that we identify our concerns, but also do it in a manner that, as he said, as efficient as possible and within a process. And a work group seems like a really good place to begin there. My personal concern about this isn't so much that, although I do think that is an entirely legitimate concern. My concern is where there's public input, that the quality of civil discourse be preserved. We have seen in a large private local blog as basically a race to the bottom in terms of really the quality of interaction. We've seen poisonous remarks, anonymous remarks. Fortunately, this policy includes in it a requirement that contributions of text not be anonymous. I'm concerned that where there's interaction, that it be toward an end that is constructive. How can we, by a policy, insist on a constructive interaction? I think you can't. I think we're asking people to do something that we would hope everyone would do. But on the other hand, a well-crafted policy will really guide people toward that end. That's really my concern. The policy that's in front of us does not appear to be making social media of local government a place where positions on complicated issues are actually aired. It does not seem to be engineered to enhance debate and dialogue. It seems to be something that channels things so that they are within the law, but it doesn't really have another side to the coin in terms of what it could do for an enhancement of the process of resolving controversy, because that's really a guaranteed aspect of what we do. And I also see that this mainly seeks to prevent an abuse of free speech rights, or rather, that's what. The policy seeks to prevent an abuse of free speech rights. So it seems to be treading on a razor's edge, which makes it such a sensitive issue. And once again, I think that having a good work group debate with a process, as David has indicated, as suggested, would be entirely appropriate. I wouldn't be ready tonight to vote on this policy because, A, I want to hear more about what David's concerns are. He's put in a lot of thought on that. And I'd like to hear more about how Ken, who's really tackled this issue and given us a report, has what his response to all this is, his input. I'd like to know. I'd love to hear some input by the BCTV people. They understand a lot of these fundamental issues as a matter of their daily work. And so that's a long way of saying, yeah, I think that would be a good idea and probably well worth the time.
Ken?
I think shutting down the sites in the interim because they don't adhere to a social media policy that we haven't passed makes absolutely no sense to me. I think that's just, I think it's really a step back in terms of accessibility and some of these entities of the town that are using these sites effectively. So I'm all for a work session, but it doesn't make sense to me to then shut everything down until we've solved this because they don't adhere to what we haven't done yet. I think there are other solutions. I think that we can talk about disabling comments, but looking at the Friends of the Brooks Memorial Library section right now, which is advertising different events, to shut that down, it makes no sense to me. I just think that's a real step back.
Dora?
Thank you, Chris, for your comments. I wholeheartedly agree with your comments, and I will add one more thing, and that is that one of the concerns I have about the use of social media is the lack of equality on people who don't have access to those social media sites, particularly those on a regular basis. And what are we doing there's nothing in this policy. It's again, it's sort of trying to keep you from going off the cliff. But there's nothing in here that really addresses how we're going to include the public, the other public that isn't part of these social media sites in whatever it is that's going on here. If it's just an announcement, then yes, that goes out in other forms. But if you start talking about the issue of discussion, then if other people don't have access to that discussion, how does that, where's the ability of those folks to be able to participate in that in timeliness? Because it's not just about, okay, so they're collecting that for a month and now they're going to bring it into a public meeting and someone in a public meeting, because those people haven't had access to all of that other discussion. So the idea of the discussion concerns me. I do agree with David about the idea of shutting down those sites. We should have done it a long time ago. There are some serious open meeting law violations going on with these sites, and one in particular has had it going along for a long time. And we've allowed that to happen. And we've allowed it to happen even after we had the decision by Bob Fisher, our attorney, telling us that the use, dialogue on social media sites can be a violation of open meeting law. Now we're talking about, we've talked about social media policy. Yes, there are entities that are just fine and they're just putting it out there in announcements, and it would be a hardship for that. But, until we make this decision, we're sitting here looking at something telling us that the way some of these sites are being used may not be appropriate. And we're sitting here saying, well, that's okay, let it go on for another couple of weeks until we make a decision on this social media policy.
Ken, you had your hand up first.
First of all, as I covered in the primer last time, there are provisions in this policy about what the content is supposed to be on these, that it's not a substitute for what's happening at meetings. I covered that at the last meeting. Everything that Dora just articulated that's not in this policy actually is in this policy. And I think we just conflated two completely different things about what Bob Fisher said about using Facebook during a meeting and the potential for that to violate open meeting law. We just conflated that to any town official or town department using Facebook, period, which those two were two separate things that I think they've just been completely conflated. Again, I think that there are steps that we can take to address the social media that's out there right now, but to shut them all down, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Barb?
A couple of things. One is, having looked at the site, I would probably not agree with Dora. What you've kind of indicated is that there's a lot of violations of open meeting going on. I think that was I don't think that's the case. I think there have been issues in the past, and I actually think they've been resolved, and that's going to happen. As far as shutting down the sites, I think it would be a hardship for some of our departments. I would be happy with instructing our departments and our committees that they need to change their social media sites so that there are not, that comments that come in are only coming in as messages as opposed to being posted. And I have no problem with them ensuring that at this point that they have taken steps to either print out or back up what's already on their site, and so that there is a set date of that. If that, if that would make it better for this body, because I don't think, I think that you will. I think that the citizens, these, citizen committees and departments, I can trust them to do what's right, and we can also, double check that they're in the meantime doing things. There is a social media policy that's utilized by the library. They have their own So that's the case with them. But I don't have any issues. I think that having Facebook, I think having means by which information is another way of getting information out. It's not meant to reach every person. It's not meant to reach every person. It's meant to reach just another segment of the population, another way of getting information out. And I think that's good. And I think if people see something that's interesting, I think that can only increase, hopefully that would help increase people coming to committee meetings and help people come to board meetings. I mean, I think we've had numerous instances where citizens had said, well, I didn't even know you were talking about this.
Right.
And I think this is another way to get the word out. It's up to the board as far as how you want to deal with the here and now. I'm just presenting what I could do to assist.
David?
I don't think it's necessary to shut them down. I raised that as a
I think that's a good point.
as a potential issue. What do we do in the interim? I think that the most significant risks that I see right now are, number one, serial dialogue on social media sites that violates the open meeting law by having a virtual meeting that's not being shared with the community as a whole and is not publicly warned. So I would request that all dialogue functions, I'm not that familiar with social media, but that all dialogue functions on social media sites that are sponsored by the town be disabled, and that the only way in which information can be shared shared back and forth or submitted is via comments that can then be preserved. I also, so I do think that shutting off dialogue and having comments submitted one way is the way to go. Second, I don't see why we need to print them off, but I do think that sites need to be archived electronically, and all comments need to be archived pursuant to a document retention policy, probably once a week. I don't think daily is necessary, although I think we should probably talk to VLCT and with the town attorney about what's an appropriate archiving schedule to make sure that the current versions of the sites and all comments are being preserved regularly so that they're available. I mean, I would note that this draft policy contemplates, as it's written, all information being posted through the town and through the authorized representative.
Right.
That's what it says. It says comment means a statement submitted to the town for posting on the social media website. And we then have very, like I said, specific and significant obligations that are taken on by the town, user agreements that people would need to comply with, monitoring of the content that's on these sites, whether by you or by a designee if you're the person who's designated, and then by designees, and I think those things really need to be addressed. I would like to see, like I say, dialogue disabled and comments being preserved and sites being preserved, and I would like to see a work session so that we can work through how we want to present this and finalize this.
Dora?
I agree with David. Just to be clear, I was not talking about town staff or town departments. I was talking about boards or committees. And part of the memo that Bob Fisher wrote was, if you engage in dialogue on a social media site as a member of the board or committee, discussing with other members of that board or committee board business, it is a violation of open meeting law. And that's what I was referring to. And that is exactly what David was just talking about.
Tim, you had your hand up before?
I have a number of comments on this issue, but it's very, very broad. I was going to say that it might help the committee if you split this up a little bit. It may have, there's social media and Facebook. Facebook's here for 24 more months and it's gone. There'll be something else after that. So, the policy is more important than the medium which we're we're talking about utilising for communication. The second thing is that I think that there are probably, and have been for the last 10 or 15 years since the inception of email, huge violations in communication between committee members, whatever the committee be, whether it's the select board or any other committee, where these records between individuals or between the groups are not properly kept as records. I mean, I know of all sorts of situations where that has gone on in the past. I've received a message from somebody, I've responded to it, then it's gone to somebody else, and then it's come back again. And I think that there is a real need for crafting a policy that allows committee members in a transparent way, whether it be the tree committee or the traffic safety committee or whatever it may be, to centrally store and share information. I'm not talking about a dialogue on there, but posting a place where the current documents that are under discussion, there's a history, there's a record of it, so there's somebody joining the committee in 2013 can see what was discussed in 2011 or 2009. And that may be somewhat different. That's more website or web page related and can be hosted and should be facilitated in whichever way the town deems fit. The process of a massive email flowing in multiple directions with everybody copied in on it doesn't work. And where I know of websites that are open to the public where there is some communication between committee members, it's primarily for the storage of making available of documents to individuals within that committee. And that I think is a strong and necessary part of the way that we should function as a town and function as a group of people as we move forward. And I haven't seen the policies, I don't know whether that's covered in it, but I would hope that that is somehow covered as a sort of part of it, but not necessarily social. Thank you.
Ken?
So, I mean, apart from the fact that I think it would be great to have Bob Fisher there, because I think what's been said is a gross oversimplification of quite a nuanced memo. That said, it would be great to reach out to the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. There is just no possible way that Brattleboro is the first place in Vermont that is figuring this out. And it is my impression that there are other towns in Vermont that already have a social media policy, and it'd be great if in some way we could reach out to them. I mean, I have no problem doing that, but if you have a better relationship and we can reach out and find out, so which other towns have this social media policy, how are they working it? There's just no possible way that we're the first ones to try to figure this out. And so it'd be great to borrow some ideas from some other people, if not outright steal them.
Christopher?
Yeah, responding to Dora briefly, I agree that the digital divide, as it's known, is quite material. I don't think, however, that should color this discussion. Anybody who's interested in town matters, who, for example, doesn't subscribe to the newspaper for economic reasons or time reasons, can get the information needed in some fashion, borrow it from a neighbor, go to the library. So I would just point out that, yes, that is a material issue, but I don't think it's material to this particular policy discussion. And I say so with great respect because your bringing it up, I think, was an important thing, Dora. The other thing is that what Mr. Cuthbertson just said, I think, is very germane. That social media sites really should be and are probably best used as sources of information for the public, not necessarily sites for fostering dialogue. The dialogues that we have in other media, like face-to-face, like meetings like this, especially meetings like this one, live, recorded, broadcast, far more relevant. Soapbox on the Commons, soapbox downtown, walking back and forth in front of the post office with a long strip of paper with comments on it, entirely appropriate. Where there is accountability, yes, that's a great idea. Discussions online, I think, are hazardous. I would agree with Mr. Cuthbertson wholeheartedly. We've all got our fingers burnt with warnings. Hey, look, nice, your intentions may be good, just don't do that, or don't do it again. Because excluding people deliberately or excluding them by virtue of the limitations of the medium is at best simply unconstructive. So I would like to add that to the as a suggestion on where we take this policy.
I would just follow up very quickly and say that there's been education and direction given at the select board level about the potential for public records and open meeting law violations through online dialogue, and we don't really do it anymore from what I've seen after like the very first week or two that the board was together a year and a half ago. But I do suspect that there are other committees and groups that engage in serial dialogue that violates the open meeting law. And I think we need to make sure that the other committees are complying with the open meeting and public records law as well.
And I do believe that the orientation last week, that was one of the concerns, that we wanted to make sure that our committees and our ad hoc committees understood the open meeting law and discussions by committee members. Certainly, you're correct. Early on, there were a couple of times where information was sent out and then it was respond all, and the next thing you're hearing is that we can't do that. That's a violation of open meeting law. And those are innocent mistakes. Those we're newbies, and you make those mistakes. It's okay to make a mistake. It's not okay to make the same mistake over and over again. And that's what the training is for. Now, as for Dora, I agree with Christopher's comment to Dora in terms of this policy is not going to be able to say, okay, we're going to provide access for people so they can visit social media websites. There is public access. It's at the library. I'm not sure if there's other public access areas in the community, if there's any down at the senior center.
TV.
TV. There's numerous places where you get information. I think Ken's point about having more opportunities to get information out, I agree wholeheartedly that we shouldn't be having discussions on those social media pages. And I agree with Tim that Facebook today, something else tomorrow. We are always going to be behind the curve. And if you think about it, if it wasn't for Ken Schneck bringing this issue up, we've had Facebook pages for a couple of years. And we're talking about this because it's one of the goals about getting a social media policy, when any one of the other four of us could have said, hey, we need to do something about this. So the reality is, this has come about from a board member. It's never risen to the level by the other board members to say, we need to do something about this. So I applaud Ken for bringing this forward. Now we just need to get it worked out. And I agree with Dave. We'll, at the end of this meeting, we'll set a date for a work session, and we'll have at it. And I think that will be the best way to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
Christopher?
Yeah, just two parting thoughts on my part, and that is, one, I would like to just state for the record, I think that it would be a mistake to shut down the existing sites, but I think what we should also do, if we're going to avoid doing that, is to also send out to all the committees the social media policy that's here, and also the primer that Ken put together, and advise them, there is a policy coming, please read these. These are not necessarily, this isn't necessarily the policy, but you can see the themes here. Get with the program, please, because we're going to have a policy, and the sooner you get used to the ideas within these, the more everyone in the town and in our society will benefit.
Okay. Last comment, Dora?
Well, just to say that And we may decide that we're not going to allow dialogue on those sites and then it doesn't matter. But if we are going to, my point about the equality thing is, then there has to be some other avenue for people who don't have access to be able to participate in that. And that should be actually contained as part of the policies.
Okay. And we will set a meeting date for a work session at the end of our agenda here today. Next item up, emergency ordinance.
I'm going to be withdrawing that request. This was my suggestion 4 or 6 weeks ago about a way to help calm traffic at Memorial Park, and we've taken a different direction as a result of Traffic Safety Committee discussions. So it's been tabled meeting to meeting, and now I would just withdraw the item.
Can I ask, was this a motion? Was there a motion on this?
We never made
There was
the
never
motion,
a motion.
so
It
we
was
just
got
tabled the item.
immediately. Okay,
Item.
so it's just being withdrawn then as an item.
Could I ask, when is it likely to come up again with a firm something to vote on? Like speed tables and things like that?
Well, speed table, we could bring up that as a FYI, but that's not actually it's not anything that the board approves, actually.
Oh, it is not?
No.
Oh.
No.
How can you help me understand who makes that decision, when it's likely to be implemented, where the money
Typically,
comes
those
from, and
would
stuff
be
like that?
approved by, usually we would do something with traffic safety. We go through traffic safety because a concern would be raised. But because it doesn't require an ordinance or anything, I mean, we could bring it to the board as an FYI, which we probably would. I'm just trying to be clear on, it would only be as an FYI,
Yeah,
as opposed to where stop signs are is ordinance-based.
I think when that does happen, that would be something, an FYI from, this would gets a bigger blurb than...
I get it.
A bigger bump.
Yeah, you get a bigger bump. Dora?
Okay.
But I just wanted to comment that this actually partially came, David had brought this issue up at a traffic safety committee meeting, and we ended up tabling it at the select board meeting because there was going to be a walkabout the following week. I actually did participate in that. A number of staff, Patrick was there, a number of staff, and one member of the public came. And the idea of doing the speed tables was one of the things that came out of that walkabout. It was, we walked the whole, we observed traffic, we had the speed gun out, we walked up through part of Memorial Park and down all the way down to the Maple Street corner and observed traffic on the bridge. So that, the idea of the speed tables was that people agreed that they didn't think that stop signs at that point were necessary, and so the idea came by Steve Barrett to try the speed tables and see if they would work.
We've been talking about speed tables there for
I know he has.
years, so
But
it's never an item.
Could I ask about that? I mean, this is of great interest to me because it seems to be because, as we all know, that area around Living Memorial Park has been a hot button item in front of us for quite some time, and I don't know.
There's some fact and fiction in that as well, and I think and that's one of the reasons these things go to traffic safety for a little more of an assessment. If you look at speed studies, the main complaint out that is speed. If you look at speed studies, there actually is not a speed issue there. There's a sense that there's a speed issue, and there are some people that speed, but the speed studies aren't indicative of the fact that this is a high-speed area. Okay, so how do you then deal with that? One of the things that we've been trying to do is try to figure out. Okay, so there's a perception. Perception is reality. What do we do? And it was a few years back when there was discussion of when we did things in that area. There was a neck down that was in there. We got rid of that so that we could, because that actually made it more difficult for bicyclists. So we did that. We also then put in fog lines. We put in a bike lane. We extended the sidewalk and changed where the crosswalk was so that the crosswalk would be actually accessible from both sides. And those were things that were done, you know. So there have been things that have been done in that area, just like there have been things that have been done in, you know, a variety of other areas. The reality of, you know, you have traffic calming devices, but those are not, you're never going to stop people from speeding, unfortunately. You know, the other thing that's interesting with that is it's all pretty much local traffic that we have issues with, as opposed to some of the speed issues that you have on Western Avenue. So as far as, there's not a silver bullet in some of these things. If we put in a speed table, it probably will help some things. You have a wide stretch. We've put in the fog lines to help narrow it down so that it feels more narrow, because the wider a road feels, the more people feel as though, you know, that they can drive faster. People will drive a speed at which the great majority of people drive a speed at which they feel comfortable and safe. Mm-hmm. That may be over the speed limit. Lowering the speed limit is not going to change the behavior. You know, there are various things that just aren't going to change that behavior. And so, you know, what we try to do in the traffic safety is you try to go back to the data. You know, you try to look and you say, I mean, at one point we could have said, speeding's not really an issue here compared to the data collection. Now, data collection doesn't happen year-round. It happens at particular times. The mere fact that you're collecting data slows people down. People don't see those, well, most people don't see the little strips that go across the road and speed up. Sometimes people do. It's kind of fun. But, you know, so it can be a complicated issue. I think what we're trying to do now, as David said at the beginning, is we're really trying to look at, okay, let's get some better criteria together. Let's get some better, you know, you don't want to be reacting to every request. We want a crosswalk here. We need a crosswalk here. We need to develop better criteria for that. And that's really what we're working on.
I appreciate your giving that perspective. I have fresh in my mind still the fact that we've had fatalities in town and injured cyclists from inattentive drivers. And so it is of great interest to me that around town, if we could experiment with speed tables, if Steve's been talking about them for years, then it raises a question as to why haven't we done something with them earlier. And if we are about to do that, I have to say that I think that I am not the only person who's really, really interested in understanding what's going on, when it's going to happen, why, what it's going to look like, and with a rollout of information to the public on what the town is doing about it. Just an FYI is going to be inadequate.
Well, I agree with you in part, Christopher. You know, go back to March, and where town meeting members, there was a motion made to give us $85,000 or $80,000, and we told them we had no idea how much it was going to cost for the issues that we were facing, and to let us do our due diligence. Mm-hmm. And then if we need to come back for more money, then we'll come back next year at town meeting. Mm-hmm. And ask for money to implement whatever that we need to do. So.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with that, and I'm not trying to say that there's not work that's going to be done, but one of the things that was just said was inattentive drivers, mm-hmm. you know, people not utilizing where there are crosswalks. There are some of those issues aren't going to be solved by a speed table.
I understand.
They're not going to be solved by infrastructure. We can do things. The other thing people have to be prepared for is that whatever we do to slow traffic down will slow traffic down.
I don't quite understand.
That annoys people sometimes.
The fact that the Citizen Bridge, the way it was designed, was to slow down the traffic. And what was the one thing that's been talked about? We need a slip lane. That doesn't slow people down. And so the reality is when you use infrastructure in a way that slows traffic down, when we slow traffic down by doing some changes on, say we make some changes on Western Avenue, we narrow down the road on Western Avenue from Academy School to Greenleaf, and we get maybe say we get rid of a turn lane or something, that's going to slow down traffic on Western Avenue going out to West B. That's going to have some backlash here. And so I would encourage you, come to a traffic safety meeting.
Okay. All right. I'll be happy to do that. I'll just point out that one of the reports, that the report on that walkabout indicated there were cars coming to what are rolling stops, meaning that they weren't stopping at all. They were rolling through the intersection near the Living Memorial Park at the Citizens Bridge.
And the only way that those are going to stop is with law enforcement sitting at that stop sign issuing tickets for rolling stops.
Okay.
And
All the time.
All the time.
It's never going to
And
happen.
so, it's you drive through states, you drive through Virginia, and they have a no cell phone state law. There's still people talking on their cell phone.
I understand that.
Okay? So unless the state trooper sees them or the local parendi see them, so whatever we do, we're still going to have people violate
I understand
because that's
that.
what they do. Okay, next item.
Financial reports, the preliminary FY12 year-end report, this is of June 30th. John O'Connor had a memo. I also had a memo explaining kind of where that, we did end up the preliminary, and just again to reiterate for folks, numbers for, we do anticipate some changes in the FY12 numbers. The auditors have been here 1.5 weeks or so, 2 weeks. There will be some changes we know of. So with that, I'll kick it over to John O'Connor for the preliminary and to discuss the end of the year.
Thanks, Barb. So the fiscal year, we closed the year with a surplus of $504,340. We had budgeted a deficit of $430,000. So we had a swing there of $934,000, $934,340, favorable budget variance. And Barb's memo kind of outlines the majority of what those changes are and where that large variance came from. So if you turn to her memo, you can see the first thing that she talks about are debt proceeds. There's a $200,000 favorable variance there. And what we did is we borrowed money to pay off a couple of leases. And the amount of money that I borrowed was equal to the payoff amount on the lease. We actually had some money budgeted for a second payment that year that if I had borrowed the net amount of that, I would have borrowed $200,000 less. So that's where that came from. Benefits, we were under budget by $170,000. A police department was under budget by $185,000. And Public Works was under budget $200,000. So that's the majority of where this favorable variance came from and why we ended up with a surplus rather than a deficit. The utilities fund ended with a surplus, and these are all preliminary numbers, as Barb said. At this point in time, has a surplus of $387,912, and that's very close to what we had budgeted. In that case, the budget variance is $11,235, so we're a little bit better than what we had budgeted. The parking fund had a surplus, has a surplus at this point of $36,952, and that's $26,913 favorable to what we had budgeted. So all of the funds, end of the year, at this point in time, on a preliminary basis, with a surplus. And there's a lot of data there if you want. If you have any questions on the detailed data, I'll try to answer those for you. And I will give you an additional update once we make final entries. We have to wait till the end of August to make some of the entries. And in this case, we didn't have the last meals and liquor tax. We hadn't received that payment yet, so there are still some things that were outstanding when this report was printed.
And actually, that check came in yesterday because I had called, and that check was for $78,000. So actually, we had $306,000 budgeted, and so we ended up being $313,000 for the rooms and meals tax.
Yep.
I did, as I was going through this, obviously, we'll get into this more when we're doing our budgeting for next year. And I did ask Barb a question about on the revenue side in terms of police department. And they were off in revenue for ordinances roughly around $40,000. And you said you were going to talk to the chief. Did you get 30,000? Did you get an answer for me?
No, I have not.
Anyone
No.
else have any questions?
But I did have a conversation with John about it.
Okay.
About the fact of how the tickets are recorded,
Yeah.
how that revenue comes in.
Yeah,
and
it comes in monthly. It's you never really know when you're going to get it, and it has been a lot lower than we have seen in the past. We also, if there are tickets written in town on a state road under a state ordinance, we're able to share in that pool. And I know I just filled out the paperwork on. They allocate the pool based on the amount of expense related to public safety in your town. So they split up the pool between all the towns based on your budget relative to other towns' budgets. So I just filled out the paperwork on that. We may be participating in that pool this year. I just don't know at this point. And I don't know what we'll be getting because I don't know what's in the pool to be shared. So there are some nuances to those ordinances, and they do tend to swing quite a bit. But it has been on a downward trend for the last couple of years.
Maybe some good questions for the auditor's race.
Maybe some good, yeah.
Because there really is a poor accounting of when you write a ticket in your town and the state, and it gets paid in, and then the state is giving you a portion. You have no idea what the portion is. You have no idea of what ticket it is for.
It's true.
And so it's just this infinite number that's out there, and whatever the state sends us, you go, okay, thank you.
Yeah,
And we
there's
have
no
no idea
backup.
of, there could be, 200 or 300 tickets issued, and we never know when we're getting payment for what tickets.
Exactly.
We'd have no idea what our receivables would be.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Is there anyone who has any other questions on the last year's budget?
Yep.
Sure.
I do. Yeah, I looked at these numbers, and what I saw was, things very close to 100%. We had things coming under budget all across the board for the departments in the aggregate, which just said to me that this was good, close management of expenses. And it's really something I'd recommend that everybody take a look at. This is a document that shows that shows the town has been doing things right. This is departmental management. It's town management. Really, I think at its best. That's the evidence that this gives. Let me tell you how relieved I am to see numbers like this, where we come in under budget, department after department. The one concern that I had was that I saw that in practically every department that has an expense budget for energy, that at least one source of energy was overspent materially. I see electricity, I see propane, I see diesel, I see gasoline here and there being pretty consistently over budget. And it's not that everybody was over with electricity, but electricity in some place was really quite large. And I guess in DPW, the diesel was over budget. The energy costs seem to have gotten ahead of us. And I just see that as a yellow flag for us as a yellow flag for us as we contemplate going into another budget year, budget forming process. I just lament also that that this result has come at a real cost of some of our services. The pool closes. Well, it's closed. Last week? So there's a couple of weeks left still in the summer with hot weather. I'm sorry to see that. We spend $750,000 on Parks and Rec, and yet we don't have the service of that absolutely beautiful facility at the pool for 2 whole weeks of the summer, winding up toward the school year. Library hours also have been cut back. These are cutbacks that where the town squeaks. It's so tight. And I'm sorry to see that. I honestly don't know what to do about it. This isn't a complaint; it's a lament. I'm sorry that it has come to that we have to budget so tightly that we have actually sacrificed some essential services for the sake of keeping expenses in line. And yet, with a surplus that we have, it seems like a lost opportunity. We couldn't see it coming. I think we had budgeted for anticipating we might have an overage, especially with Hurricane Irene. Sidewalk repairs and DPW equipment, culvert repair. Love to see some of this money put to work if we could possibly do that to restore just a little more play in what we have available for really these essential services.
Well, there'll be budgetary items as they are every year, and it's a board's decision to close the pool early, and it was the board's decision.
I understand that.
Although the library does have a trust fund that they could expend monies if they wanted to extend their hours. Mr. Wilmerding.
John Wilmerding, District 3. As the board knows, I'm on the Finance Committee, and we've been having discussions recently with John about the town's indebtedness. And we will be hoping for further discussions with him about that. I also wanted you and the public to know that next week, a week from today, we will be having a representative of the State Bond Bank to visit us here in the Finance Committee meeting on Tuesday evening, the 28th, to discuss standards and limits on municipal indebtedness.
What time do you guys meet? What time is that again, John?
The Finance Committee is usually at 4:30, actually.
Okay.
4:30 in the
Tuesday at 4:30.
Tuesday
Next
the 28th at 4:30.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tim? Oh, okay. Next item?
Next is the monthly report for the first month of FY13.
And the first month of the year, it's really difficult to see any trends or anything at this point. So it's going to be a pretty short report.
Come on, John.
Currently under budget.
Thank you.
You know the numbers. Give us something.
Okay.
Okay. Next, in following the board's request to meet with committees, we have Tim Cuthbertson here to talk a little bit about the Development Review Board, what it does, and why more people should be interested in vying for a seat on the board.
Vying being the operative word, I think.
Thank you, and introduce yourself. For those of you who don't know you, they can certainly see your meetings on TV, so I'm always thankful that we have worked to get DRB meetings and the Planning Commission meetings on TV.
We like it when we're live.
That's right.
Tim Cuthbertson, Chair of the Development Review Board. First, let me commend the Select Board for their recent interest in the work of town committees and boards. In the 6 years that I've been on the DRB in one capacity or another, this is the first Select Board that I recall requesting meetings with town committees. So I don't know whether, I think it was Ken possibly that suggested this, but I commend the board for showing interest in what the volunteers in the town do on these various boards and allowing us to communicate it to yourselves. So I'm here to represent the DRB, the Development Review Board, and talk about the board in very broad terms. The Development Review Board is an entity that is different from other appointed committees in that it is a quasi-judicial board that hears applications for land development, and we don't have work per se, we don't have specific goals or a long-term agenda. The board has 7 members and 3 alternates, and we'll talk more about that a little later. The board is apolitical, it's strongly independent, and strives to be impartial in its decisions. Board members do not discuss applications, past, present or future, and members of the board take care not to comment personally on any matter pending or likely to come before the board, or they're likely to have to step down and not sit on that matter. The board meets monthly, and depending on workload, up to twice a month. In the past 4 years, we've normally met about once a month, as the number of applications before the board has been fairly light. It's encouraging to note that applications for new development appear to be on the increase, and we are fairly regularly holding two meetings per month now. So I think that's a good time for the town that there's development of that nature. I have 2 requests really from the DRB to the Select Board, and the first request is that there's an appeal for more members to the board. In the last 4 years we have not had a full board. Maybe 5 years ago was the last time we had a full board. This can be quite critical with certain applications. We have lawyers on the board that recuse themselves from applications. We have members that have conflicts of interest. We have members that are sick or vacate or go on vacation. And I have chaired the first meeting this year, I think, where we were down to a board of 4, which means that, including the chair, which means that an applicant has to have 100% unanimous vote to have their application approved. We will, of course, allow that applicant to continue their application to a future meeting where there will be more board members, but it's a situation where when we don't have the requisite number of alternates to fill in, it can get a little tricky. And it's something which applicants should really not have to face as members of the public wishing to do land development in this town. It's I can assure everybody, you don't have to be an expert to be on the board. It's a volunteer position that's interesting, rewarding. I certainly feel that the board makes a significant contribution to the community. At times it's even fun. And anything that the Select Board can do to encourage people to apply or vie for those positions. We currently have 2 alternate positions open, and we'd like to see them filled. The second thing is that I think the board would like the Select Board to encourage in various areas substantial revisions to the zoning code. There are pieces of the town's zoning ordinances that are really aged out. It's not that they're inaccurate, it's not that they're wrong, it's just that they've aged out, it's timed out. Our subdivision ordinance was crafted in the early 80s, has been tinkered with once or twice, but really it's time that those ordinances were brought into up to current. So with that being said, I don't know whether anyone has any questions for me or...
David?
I served on the DRB for 9 years, and the ordinance
I
was out
remember
of
well.
date. Yes, we shared a board 1 year, and the ordinance was out of date when I was on the board. There's going to be a question whether the planning department staff is the right a group to be doing the revision, or whether we're going to need to spend money in order to pay somebody to tackle that task. And I do think that there need to be discussions with the planning department staff about whether they feel they're going to be able to do that, and if not, who best to tackle that work and what it's going to cost us, so that we have that information before we go into the budget cycle. Because I do think it's a priority. I thought it was a priority 10 or 15 years ago, and it really hasn't been done since. It's incredibly arcane, that zoning ordinance, in significant part. I would also say the one comment I had leading into this meeting had to do with notice of DRB meetings and making sure that notice is adequately provided. And from time to time, we revisited on the Development Review Board the nature of the notice that's provided of meetings to abutters. And I would just encourage the board, when it reviews its policies and procedures, to look again at those notice provisions and make sure that notice is as full as possible for adjoining landowners of applications that are being heard.
Dora?
Certainly.
I agree with David. I served on the DRB with Tim for like 3-4 years. I can't remember how many. Before I was on the board, and in between I was on the board. Just to put a plug out there for the new members that Tim has requested. It is a rewarding, a really interesting. It's an interesting board to be on, and you get to see. It's the only board, really, where you see like every sort of variety of person that lives in this community, because everyone that's doing a project has to go before that board. So it's not like the other boards where participation in their proceedings is voluntary unless it's some sort of legal thing. And people are interested in that and they go to it. The DRB is anyone that's doing a project, they have to go before the DRB. So you get to see all kinds of things in the town and learn about people and learn about history through the process of reviewing those projects. And it can be really interesting. And if you have any interest in design and site issues, it's definitely the board to be on.
Ken?
Can you speak more to what you think is, I have to be honest with you, in some ways I feel more intimidated to be on the DRB than I do on the select board. It's just that impression out there, which I know isn't accurate, having attended DRB meetings, that you need this very specialized knowledge in order to be on the DRB. And so can you do more to maybe break that down?
I said a little earlier, you don't have to be an expert to be on the board. What you do have to be able to do is read extensively. I mean, every single week, just like the select board does, you get a packet of information that can be this big or this big. And then there's contextual information, and then there's the zoning ordinance itself, which is a book that's this thick, which you need to spend time studying, and you don't have to study the whole thing before you join the board. You study the little piece that's relevant to the applications that are on your hearing schedule for the following week. And over a period of time, sitting on the board, you learn from the other members. I mean, it's an educational process, and there's members of that board there that have been there, back onto to David's time, in 9-10 years, and they've gone off the board and come back on again. And there's members that have been there for less than a year, and those that have been there for less than a year are gaining information every single meeting. It's not a complex process, really. It's well documented. We have procedures and rules, and we interpret the zoning code to the best of our abilities. And sometimes, when we're determining if it's a soda fountain or not, it's a little difficult. Maybe. It's something that, I think Dora's just made a wonderful case for it. It's very varied. We could be dealing with chickens one week and a supermarket the next, or a large industrial development or a subdivision. It's fascinating. It keeps you on your toes, and it's exceptionally interesting and rewarding. You have to commit to read. That's it. Really, you have to read the documents and you have to read the code and interpret it in the best way that you can.
Gives you just a great overview of the business that's going on in town and the development that's
absolutely.
going on in town.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the best way to know what's going on in town.
And again, I said what's also encouraging this year is that in the last, let's say 6 months, and I hesitate to make a year, is that we have seen a real increase in applications, and whether it's expansion of industrial plants, in the south of the town, or whether it's supermarkets in the north of the town, it's encouraging that people are, just purely by counting the numbers of applications, that there's interest in developing the town, and there's an economic, I'm not going to say upturn, but there's investments being made that bode well, I think, for the future.
Thank you.
Very good. Any questions from the public for Tim? Thank you. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Thanks
Pleasure.
for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim.
The board is asked now to approve a 3-year labor union contract between the Town of Brattleboro and the United Steelworkers Local 944. That local represents employees within our basically within our public works and our recreation and parks. Highlights, as I have in the memo, are it's a 3-year contract. First year 0% across the board, with a 1% for persons at the top of their ranges. FY14 would be a 1.5% across the board. FY15 a 1.5 across the board. Health insurance is a little different. The tentative agreement calls for the town to pay 91% of the sum of the annual premium plus the maximum in-network out-of-pocket. Currently, the range is anywhere from 89 to 92%. What this allows for is the increases either in the premium, increases in the maximum in-network out-of-pocket would be shared between the town and the employees. And finally, the agreement calls for the removal of 2 1/2-day holidays. That would be Christmas and New Year's Eves, and would add in the place of those 2 half-days, 1 day of personal leave.
I move to approve the tentative agreement between the Town of Brattleboro and the United Steelworkers Local 944 as presented.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? 5-0. Thank you.
Next, the board is asked to award a bid to Delory Sales of Hoosick, New York. That would be for a dump truck. This the bid is actually not the lowest bid. The lowest bid did not it did not meet the truck specifications. This bid and the lowest bid, this is actually the third lowest bid. The second lowest bid was for a truck that the maintenance people, upon research, felt had known paint body issues. So with that, we're asked to approve this bid for $150,765 plus a 7-year, 75,000-mile extended warranty of $75. The total is $151,515. There was $175,600 budgeted for this purchase.
A motion, please.
Move to award the bid from Delory Sales of Hoosick, New York for HP Fairfield dump body and power angle plow for $150,765 plus the 7-year, 75,000-mile extended warranty for $750 for a total of $151,515.
Discussion? Dora?
I just want to say that I'm really appreciative with the explanation and the thought that the staff gave to this. And it's interesting because I remember having a discussion in one of the budget meetings a couple of years ago about the issue of whether or not you should go with a different make of vehicle. And I like that, because I think in the long run, even if it might be more expensive, it saves you money.
Further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5-0. Thank you.
The board now is asked to approve the purchase of 2 one-ton pickup trucks, and we would be utilizing the State of Vermont General Services contract bid. Currently, the State of Vermont contracts with Shire Chevrolet of Burlington, Vermont. That's the state vendor. And this would be for bid prices. One of the vehicles is $29,289. The other is $36,002. $45,000 was budgeted for each of these vehicles.
How much? I'm sorry?
$45,000.
Wow.
Motion, please.
I move to approve the purchase of 2 one-ton pickup trucks with plows and extended warranties utilizing the State of Vermont's General Services contract bid service for bid prices of $29,289 and $36,002.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Thank you.
It's a great job
Chief.
finding that. Wow.
Chief Mike Picassi, Fire Chief Mike Picassi is here to discuss a dry hydrant grant application. It is, the actual grant is for $9,800. It would put a dry hydrant up in intersection of Ames Hill and Abbott Road. The actual total cost for the purchase and installation of the hydrant and fire pond is $19,600. The property owner on which this would be placed would be taking care of the match, the 50% match of the other $9,800. Brattleboro Fire would then assume responsibility for the annual testing and additional hydrant maintenance. I've asked Chief Picassi to be here to explain a little bit more on the work for the dry hydrants and other dry hydrants, others examples of when we've entered into contracts with property owners for dry hydrants. And also just for the people, just explain what a dry hydrant is.
Sure. Why don't I start there? A dry hydrant looks very much like a fire hydrant that's on our town streets that are hooked to the municipal water supplies. Basically, it's a fire hydrant with a pipe attached underground that runs into the water source. In this case, everything we have in town are run into ponds. We have quite a few actually in town. We have one on Ames Hill up by Burroughs Road. We have one on Overlook Drive off Black Mountain Road. One in the Quail Hill development. One on Hamilton Road at the Hamilton Farm, one on Marlborough Road near the town line, and then one up on Paul's Road right in front of Omega Optical. This grant that we're asking for tonight, actually we are approached by the landowners. They would like to build the pond to dry up some of the land on the corner of Ames Hill and Abbott Road. It's that big field parcel on the right-hand side there. So they would use the pond as a retention basin, and we would like to apply to the Vermont Rural Fire Protection Task Force for half the cost of the work in the hydrant to install the hydrant. So a dry hydrant, basically the pipe runs into the water supply, and it's a static water source. It's not under pressure. Basically, we hook to it with a truck, drop the atmospheric pressure within that pipe, and it allows the water to flow into the hydrant and then into the truck, and we pump it from there. This hydrant that we're asking for tonight will dramatically increase water supply in that area. The closest one there is all the way to the top of Ames Hill, like I said, near the Burroughs Road, or we go all the way back down to Greenlee Street near Green Meadow to get to a town hydrant.
A question for you in terms of payment by the participant here. There's nothing in the motion that talks about when they pay. When is this agreement written up in terms of payment for their half of this project?
I can't directly answer that because Pete Lynch has been working with the landowners and he was unable to be here tonight. So my understanding is that the landowner is working directly with the contractor and will pay that contractor directly for the costs that they incur to do the project. This grant will only pick up what isn't in that cost, if that makes sense.
We can have that ready for you. If the grant's awarded, it'll come back to the body and we can have that, we have that then.
Okay. Motion, please.
Move to approve the $9,800 grant application for a dry hydrant from the Dry Hydrant 2012 Special Cases Grant through the Vermont Rural Fire Protection Task Force.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
The board is asked to accept and appropriate a $5,000 grant from the Governor's Highway Safety Equipment Incentive Grant. This grant would be used to purchase HG camcorders, radar packages, collapsible road cones. There's a shipping contingency in it, so it's essentially for traffic safety enforcement equipment.
Motion, please.
Move to accept and appropriate a $5,000 grant from the Governor's Highway Safety Equipment Incentives Grant for the purchase of traffic safety enforcement equipment.
Further discussion? Yes, Bill.
Well, I just have a question, and Gene and Mike aren't here, so I don't know if we can get an answer for this, but what is the camcorder being used for? Are they using it to videotape accidents and things, or are they using
I would assume that the camcorder would be utilized for after an accident, if it was going to be recording the kind of the scenes at an accident. Currently, they'd use some pictures, etc. But I would assume it is for accident scenes. Moves everything then to the HG kind of movie, which is the same format as the videos from the cruisers.
Oh, okay.
Have a motion on the floor?
Well, I'll ask later.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5-0.
Next is a grant application. This is through the Vermont Transportation Bike and Pedestrian Grant. You're actually asked to hold a public hearing on this. We're seeking funding to address crosswalks on Western Avenue that are currently 60 feet long or longer. Those are crosswalks really should be closer to 50, 55 feet. We have several in the area that are closer to 75 to closer to or 80. Specifically, there's two aspects to this grant. One is to work with reducing the length of the crosswalk at Western Avenue and Union Hill. That grant application has been submitted twice, 2 different times. Each time we've received kind of part of it, but not the full amount to actually do the work. Back in 2007, there were public hearings and discussions there were 4 different options for how to reduce the size of that crosswalk. At that time, it came to basically kind of doing some bulb outs to reduce the length of the kind of the crosswalks that's right at the top of Union Hill. It also changes to some degree where that crosswalk is. Currently, people now are kind of coming up and onto the crosswalk a little bit so that they can get a better line of sight. So we will do some adjustments there as well. So that would actually be, we'd be seeking funding for final design and construction. The other work that we'd be doing would be seeking $30,000 for scoping and engineering of the Western Avenue between Academy School and Greenleaf School. That's about a 0.4 of a mile stretch in which there are 3 or 4 crosswalks that are all over the 60 feet. Some 2 are about 78 feet, one is like 65 feet. What we would be doing, looking for there is someone to come, is to hire an engineering company that would evaluate that stretch of road, that would look at what are options for reducing the size of the of those crosswalks, while at the same time looking at and enhancing how are we going to enhance kind of pedestrians and bicycles. We do have bike lanes there. There's the road's really wide. What might be some of the best solutions? There are various alternatives for how to reduce the size of a crosswalk. As David said earlier, Canal Street, the solution in that area of Canal Street is actually to put an island in the center of that. That may be what we do in some of these areas. It may also be that we just try to reduce the size of the road. And what we would hope to have done is to have some engineering alternatives presented, have public discussions about to find out what people would find as the most attractive solutions. And with the idea here would be to increase safety for pedestrians.
So I will open the public hearing and take any comment on this grant application.
Did receive 2 emails today, both from members of the West Brattleboro Association who spoke in favor of applying for these funds.
Okay. Seeing no comment by the public, I will close the... excuse me.
I think the stuff that David was talking about earlier, traffic calming, I have personally sat at the Academy crosswalk and watched people speed up to beat the kids. I mean, it's really, I've got to get there faster than these kids can cross. I mean, it's absurd. It really is crazy. And the last, this year, we've had white bollards put down the middle, and it's been narrowed on the sides. And you watch people slow right down. I mean, it's a perfect example of how things calm as soon as it's like, oh, I've got to dodge that one, and then I've got to dodge that one, and now I'm in my lane and I'm going slower. Likewise, the next crosswalk up, which is in front of Stockwell's, the O'Gilly's restaurant, that's, I don't know, 78 feet wide or 80 feet wide or whatever it is, it's huge. And it's a sprint to beat the traffic across that one, particularly when coming into town through West Brattleboro. It's really a blind bend with a little flashing orange light in the middle of the street. And traffic kind of comes around that bend and accelerates. It's kind of interesting to watch it. It accelerates because it's so wide and so open. It's like, now we're safe, and oh, I can get through here. And I personally have come close to hitting someone on that crossroad because wasn't paying perfect attention. And you watch people, do this, and then do this, and then do this. So anything that we can do out there to, number one, calm the traffic or slow it, and number two, make those crosswalks safer or more noticeable. Part of the problem is that sometimes it's quite, and you get an evening out there where we're moving into the fall, it's quite dark, and you're on it before you even, the lighting in that area is not particularly good. Or you're on it before you even know it's a crosswalk, and the little yellow signs that are on the side are, maybe not enough warning. So, having this looked at professionally and coming up with some solutions for it, I wholeheartedly support that grant application.
Thank you. I will now close the public hearing and accept a motion.
I move to approve a grant application in the amount of $105,000 for the Vermont Bike and Pedestrian Grant Program to enhance pedestrian safety along Western Avenue, specifically at crosswalks over 60 feet in length.
Further discussion? Dora?
Can we just make sure, depending on what time of day they're going to be looking at these intersections, there are certain places, certain times of year, and certain times of day where the glare from the sun really makes it difficult to see. And if they're going to be looking at these intersections, particularly out in West Brattleboro by the Academy School, it's pretty bad over there as far as that glare is concerned at certain times. Can we just make sure that that's discussed with the engineers when they're studying it? Because if they're not out there during the time when that's happening, they may not know. It changes during,
Further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Thank you.
Town Energy Committee is here. Why don't you guys come on up, start getting yourselves plugged in. They're here with the intent of educating board members and citizens on solar photovoltaic energy systems. And with that, I will leave the rest up to the members of the committee to introduce themselves. We are not asking, the board's not being asked this evening to review any specific contracts, to talk about entering into contract. This is really an introduction to the topic.
And please introduce yourselves.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Paul Cameron, Town Energy Coordinator.
Lester Humphreys, Chair of the Energy Committee.
Jason Cooper, member of the committee. Judd Leslie, member.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
You're up.
So what we'd like to do tonight is just give you a brief and general overview of solar electric projects with a particular emphasis on power purchase agreements, which is something the town would enter into if it decided to purchase power from a solar electric project. And the reason the Energy Committee is interested in these types of projects is that part of our mission is to assist town government in reducing energy consumption and costs through conservation, increased energy efficiency, and conversion to renewable energy sources. So what are power purchase agreements? Basically, the way they work is that a municipality enters into an agreement with the developer of a solar project, and the project may or may not be located on land owned by the municipality. The municipality agrees to purchase power generated by the solar project for a specified price and term. In turn, the developer receives tax incentives and depreciation and a guaranteed rate on the electricity produced over a fixed rate of time, which is typically 5 to 10 years. Now, there are a number of benefits to the municipality. There's generally no upfront cost. The agreement provides a hedge against rising electric rates because the price is set for the term of the agreement. The municipality obtains a portion of its power from a clean, renewable source. The developer is responsible for financing, designing, installing, and maintaining the project so that the town is not involved with those aspects. And the municipality has the opportunity for outright ownership of the project, which could result in a significant savings. Now, there are lots of different kinds of power purchase agreements, and just a few points of negotiation with these agreements. The first is the length of the term. The second is the price of electricity that's agreed to over the length of the term. The third is the lease terms, and this is in an example where the project was located on municipally owned land, and the developer leased the land from the town. And finally, opportunities for renegotiation or buyout. And just to give you an example of a town in Vermont that has signed a power purchase agreement, the town of Starksboro, Vermont, which is a town of 2,000 people located near Burlington, had a goal of providing their municipal buildings and their elementary school with renewable power. So they created a power purchase agreement with All Earth Renewables, which is a company located in Williston, Vermont, in 2010. They built the project in a field adjacent to the municipal buildings and the school. It's 25 solar panels, 100 kilowatt system, producing 141,000 kilowatt hours per year. So again, this has just been a really brief overview of power purchase agreements as they relate to solar electric projects. And we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Barb?
Can I ask one? One of the things, like it was in the newspaper last week or something, where it was Bennington. Was it Bennington that it was looking? They just started again reviewing their entering into an agreement, and they had looked at it a couple of years ago and made a determination that it wasn't kind of financially advantageous, but now they're looking at it again. Do you know? Is there a way? Where would we go to find? What are some good criteria for looking at agreements? What are some of what's the data that you look at to just try to get a good sense of whether or not an agreement is advantageous? I'm not asking you if it would just be something that if there's something where that would help kind of educate it, or would it be something you'd be interested in doing, is like reaching out to Bennington and saying, okay, what happened when you looked at it the first time? Why are you looking at it again? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I think that's something the Energy Committee could do. We could do the research into what other towns in this area have done and how it's worked out and the types of agreements. A lot of this information from this presentation was from the Vermont Energy and Climate Action Network. They're a really good resource for these types of questions. So I think we could be a good resource to the town if the town wanted to pursue a project of this kind.
You have to realize also this is relatively new. It is happening, so it's an evolving thing. One of the exciting things about just sort of with the combination of solar panels have come down drastically in price just recently, and with the tax incentives and things like that, we're talking about deals that are competitive with buying at the regular rates from the grid. So in the past, you've been talking about to do solar, you're talking about paying more. Now we're talking about competitive rates.
Do you know if are these for-profit projects that are happening? So if it's on municipal property, they're making a profit in terms of who else they're distributing to, and it's not just the municipality that they have an agreement with?
The companies that are doing these are for-profit companies, which is an important part of the equation so that they can get the tax breaks. If a municipality is involved and it's on municipal land, then there would be an agreement to lease at market rates, the space to the for-profit company, so that the town is making something in the deal. And most of the deals that we've seen, all the power then goes to the municipality. I suppose that could be done otherwise, but I don't think towns are usually in the business of leasing for business companies for other companies or other towns or something.
Given the problems up in Burlington with some of the municipal issues that they've had with the telecom, why would a municipality want to run and jump into, and actually the board had a presentation by them early in my tenure about developing what happened up there down here. Luckily for us, we never pursued that. Talk to me a little bit about that. Why would we want to do this other than some of the obvious that you talked about?
One of the benefits of a power purchase agreement is initially all you would be agreeing to is to purchase power at a particular rate for a particular length of time. The contracts we've looked at so far, they would fix the price of the power at today's rate. So if you're currently paying 13 cents a kilowatt hour, power purchase agreement may well say, okay, you get to purchase, you agree that you're going to purchase from this entity for 10 years or 5 years. They agree to sell you all the power it generates at that rate. So what you have is a predictability and a stability, an assurance that you know exactly what your power is going to cost for the next 5 or 10 years. That's not too common in any energy industry that you have that kind of assurance. So that's one of the benefits. When you have the potential to buy out the project after 5 or 10 years or whatever is negotiated into the contract, at that point you can make the determination if it's something that you want to go into as an owner. It may be you decide, no, you have no interest. It may be that the potential profit is there enough, or I should say the potential savings are so great that it is well worth it to do that. After a certain, the 5 years, the initial 5 years is when the tax benefits that go to the for-profit are used up. So that's why the 5-year period is usually the first option to buy out. So by the time you get to 5 years, you buy the project for, just to throw out numbers, maybe 60% of the original purchase price of putting the installation in. But as a consumer of electricity, you would be more interested in the fact that you are now owning the means of production. 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road, the town can decide whether it is appropriate. But you don't have to make that decision in the beginning. In the beginning, all you're doing is deciding whether you want to lock in a particular electric rate for a particular period into the future.
Dora?
So we've been working on this at the Solid Waste District, actually, with the Planning Committee. We've had conversations with Lester and Paul, and Bob Spencer has been talking to them. It's a little more complicated for the Solid Waste District because it's a landfill as opposed to just being land. But there's so many different ways you can do this, and there's so many different things involved that these guys, they've done a lot of research and they're getting a lot of information. But one of the things we decided at the district was we're going to need to bring somebody in to really look at it and help us decide what to do. And it may be something that this board needs to decide as well. I'm not suggesting we do that now, but if we're really seriously going to talk about this, we may need to do that because most of the information is actually from the entities that want to do the development. And so if you want an independent person, independent entity to come in and, give you, analyze everything that you have and give you all the information. So it might make sense. It might make sense to do that at some point.
David?
I have a similar concern to that expressed by Dora. If we're talking about committing the town to a long-term project where we're committed to paying a certain amount of money for energy, I'm going to want a full market analysis. I'm going to want to make sure that we fully understand all the ramifications of what we're entering into. I'm going to want to make sure that it's done in a competitive way and that we're not going to wind up with any potential negative impact to the town. You put the benefits to the town, but I'm sure that there's risk and they weren't put up on the board there, and that's what I want to protect the town against. We entered into a long-term contract with Honeywell, and I see it come up that we got to pay it, but I've got no clue what services they're providing to us and what we're paying that money for and what cost savings are supposedly accruing to the town as a result. And I'm going to want to see a full analysis before we can even marginally consider this. I did see, and speaking of violations of the open meeting law, I did see communications that were forwarded to us over the last 2 weeks by Mr. Wilmerding about some discussions that apparently were going on between members of the Energy Committee and a vendor. And there appeared to be some pressure to enter into a contract right away and with no negotiation. It had to be done within 30 days. And I want to be very clear, I am totally uninterested. I am not willing to do business on behalf of the town like I'm on a car lot that's trying to sell me a car and the deal expires tomorrow. This has got to be done right if it's going to be done. And I mean, I'm concerned in the long term. We're in the business of providing core essential municipal services, and I don't really know that I want to be in the business of producing energy on behalf of the town, because it's hard for me to believe that 5 years out, after we spend the money to buy the panels, there's not going to be expense that the town's going to bear. I mean, every new project that we take on is an additional cost in the budget. And we have to be really clear about all the costs that are potentially going to be borne by the town before we can even consider entering into this type of thing. I'm all in favor of solar energy. I think it's a great idea, but when you're asking the town to be entering into a sole source agreement and lock in a price for a long period of time, there's a lot of things to think about.
If I can
Yes.
respond. As an energy committee, some vendors came to us, and it's not our place to make decisions or negotiate or any of that. Part of what I think we're wanting to gauge tonight is sort of some guidance about how to go forward with these different proposals. Should these proposals be going, directly to the select board? Should they be going to the town manager? What's the procedure for this kind of thing? And so that's, I think, part of what we want to get tonight. The other thing I think is important is separating kind of what Jason was talking about, the difference between a power purchase agreement and owning and operating a system. Those are two very different things. Owning and operating a system would take, definitely research. What's the town getting into? What are the issues? The savings there are potentially large, but there's also issues that, like you brought up, that, what are the costs? What are the maintenance issues? Those kind of things. And then separate from a power purchase agreement, which is sort of like a pre-buy program from an oil vendor. You're either going to take the electricity from Green Mountain Power at its rate, whatever it is in the future, or you're going to lock in a rate with a solar vendor that is putting the electricity into the grid and then selling it to the town at a fixed rate. So it's very similar to a pre-buy program. So that's a much simpler, everything is, you don't pay for a kilowatt hour unless it's produced and put into the grid. And all the maintenance issues, all the issues with the solar panels, everything are up to that company. So I just want to separate those two things.
Anything else?
Oh, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say it's. I think the one way to look at it is currently the town purchases its power from Green Mountain, and if you do a power purchase agreement, the only thing you're committing to is to buy from a solar generator, and the only commitment you have with them, as we understand the contracts at this point, would be to say, we will buy whatever you are generating, whatever we need, any power we purchase, we will purchase through you. But what you get in return is you get a guarantee that you know exactly what your price is. You don't get that through Green Mountain Power. Green Mountain Power could decide next week or next month or next year how much they want to increase their price. And I think historically they're increasing their price at about 5% a year. If you go into a power purchase agreement, that tends to be a fixed price, so you'd know that, okay, for the next 5 years or 10 years, your electric price rate is going to be flat.
Tim?
I have a quick comment. I was driving back on 91 today listening to PBS, and the Public Service Board of Vermont has just approved a windmill project in somewhere up north. I can't remember exactly why. And part of the reason that there was urgency in approving it, and of course there are some objections to it too, was that the tax credits that were available to make the project viable from the standpoint of the investor time out at the end of 2012. And whether that's the case with solar arrays, I don't know. That was a windmill project that's being discussed. But I'm of the, one of the things that we would need to investigate is at some point if the tax credits die, or the programs or the incentives that these companies that are proposing this type of project disappear, then these things become unviable. It seems to me that it's dependent on this 5-year tax credit for whatever it is, and that's why there's an apparent rush to get this stuff done before a tax credit times out. Of course, we don't know whether a tax credit comes for the year 2013 or 2014 or 2015, but there's always this sort of the car salesman thing. I've got to get it done in 2012 because tax credits go away and there won't be a project next year. So I think there'll probably always be a guillotine on it. I'm pushing it, and the thing to do is to just, Dora said, and David said, just do the research, understand what the metrics are in this thing, and then give yourself plenty of time to determine whether or not it's viable and that the whole thing stands from a tax standpoint. Maybe what the tax thing is. I don't know.
We've studied the tax rules, and they do change from year to year, but once a company goes forward, they lock in their tax credits so that the company that's putting this together knows what they're dealing with. They know their spreadsheets. They know what their costs are. But that doesn't mean that the following year it's not going to be different, because the tax situation has changed for a new project, a different project.
One of my concerns for this was actually a budget item, an agenda item that we discussed at our last board meeting, was location of these and the lack of control that anybody has in where they can be located. So I don't know, I don't have any idea of how big of a resource area you would need to put up X amount of panels. I don't know how many panels it would take. But like any other project, there could be opposition to it, as to say, because aesthetically, they're not very pleasing, and anybody that drives up Western Avenue sees those panels in that beautiful field, and they look like crap, to be honest with you. And so you're going to have issues. And so it's not going to be like, oh, this is great and wonderful, especially if the municipality's doing it. And or if this is going to be on private property, you're going to have to go before the DRB, and you're going to have issues. Those are concerns that I have about this. I have concerns about these panels. I think they're great, but they're not the most aesthetically looking things, and you can plop one down anywhere, and your neighbor doesn't have any say as to what impact it's having on the value of his property or whatever. It's an unregulated field at this point in terms of where they can go, how they look, where they're planted. It's pretty interesting.
The DRB has no jurisdiction.
That's correct. We know that.
With regard to where these things are cited.
That's right. We know.
I think personally, I think it's a problem. Within planning, not with the DRB, but there should be local site plan review of. The Public Service Board has had this. The legislation has had it structured, I think, almost specifically, so that local DRBs cannot object to renewable energy projects, and it's covered by the PSB. And
well, that's a policy decision.
Yeah,
the state has decided that it's going to place a higher value on development of renewable energy than on aesthetics and local control over planning, and that's what the legislature decided.
Mr. Wilmerding.
I just wanted to add that I had heard that solar arrays are also exempt Act 250, and there's a similar value judgment being made by the state that we should shift our populace over to renewable sources of energy. I had a clarifying question I wanted to ask. I'm told in my own research, which I've been doing on behalf of the Finance Committee for over a year into renewables, that the Green Mountain Power Company has a monopoly on selling electricity in this area of the state. And so there's an apparent disconnect between that fact and statements that you can hear from Green Mountain Power to the effect that you must buy your electricity from Green Mountain Power, that's the law, with the idea that you would sign a power purchase agreement with another entity, such as the people who are investing or constructing a solar array. So I wanted to ask the committee if they can clarify that, because I think there's a reasonable answer to it. I think there's some kind of set of agreements with Green Mountain Power as an intermediary that make this kind of power purchase agreement possible. I'm still educating myself on this stuff. And I just wanted to hasten to respond to David Gartenstein's remark about violations of open meeting law. I've never seen any in what I have done in talking with people about what I learned about, quite honestly and candidly from a committee member, as something that might possibly benefit the town.
Committee members when asked a question, do you have an answer for Mr. Wilmerding?
Sure. The first, well, a number of questions there. As far as the way this works, this has to do with something that's worked out between the state and Green Mountain Power, where the company that puts together the solar panels puts the electricity into the grid. The Green Mountain Power is required to set up a meter and meter how much electricity is going in and pay a certain rate to the user of that power. And so and Green Mountain Power has a monopoly to deliver that electricity. So it goes into the grid at the solar panels and out of the grid wherever the meters are. And this has been worked out between Green Mountain Power and the state.
Dora?
Well, just to follow on what you were saying, Dick, I think whatever, if we do decide to do this, there really needs to be a large public dialogue. Because if it's going to be something that we're signing on to, placement of those of those solar panels, whether or not we do it, there really needs to be some serious public dialogue about that, because we don't want to be entering into an agreement that people are going to be objecting to.
Christopher.
Yeah, just to put some perspective on this, I mean, we are expected as elected public servants to be skeptics about matters of business. This is new. I have not forgotten the controversy I read about for longer than a year out of Bellows Falls on the potential purchase of the dam up there. It was hugely complicated, and there was a lot of information, and so what you're hearing tonight, I think is entirely appropriate skepticism and worry and doubt. But on the other hand, what you are talking about is tantalizing. If energy prices really become very volatile, more volatile than they are now, because they're already quite volatile. And it looks like we, as a town, could have more control over our electricity sources. And let me point out that in looking at the budget numbers for the prior year, it was the most consistent overage among the departments was energy costs, whatever the source, in different ways, in different sources, electricity, diesel, gas. If it does become economical to enter into long-term arrangements where we could have some control over the price of the energy, I think we would want to move forward. And for that reason, I'm very grateful that you've brought this to our attention. I think it's very valuable. Perhaps not right now, when you really don't have much of an advantage. You're telling us we have basically a break-even available to us, and the benefit would be the benefit of experience if we tried it and went through an iterative process where we have trial and error on making investments here, which of course we can't afford right now. If this looks good, I am glad to know that you have really done some basic spade work, and I think that we're all benefiting just from this discussion, uncomfortable though it is. And thank you for having really turned over the earth on this and showed us what the possibilities are, as well as listened to the worries and doubts that we've expressed.
One of the things, I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the things that you could do for us is to give us, not necessarily this moment, but put together a list of the questions, the concerns, the things you might like us to look into, so that we can provide you with more information. What are your concerns? What are your questions that you'd like us to try and find answers for? And that would help us to be able to provide you with more information.
Could I respond to that?
I guess I would tell you to rewatch the meeting, and all the issues that were raised by David, by Christopher, by myself, by Dora, are really the questions that need to be answered.
Very good.
And I don't mind having this discussion, but there are huge concerns out there. We have two members of the public here. This is a broader discussion issue: location, 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 aesthetics, complications, upside, downside. And anything that's ever been really brought to the board, I only get the upside. And unless somebody from the board or somebody from the public asks the downside question, the presenter really doesn't talk about the downside, and I don't blame him. But to be fair, you need to tell us what the upside and the downside is in terms of commitment by the municipality for this term, whether it's just a lease, whether it's 5 or 10 years, and then we walk away. Then the next question would be, what happens to that parcel of property? What happens to the entity if they go bankrupt or they walk away from the project? Those are things that I think David was kind of alluding to early on here in this discussion. So all the things that you would be as a skeptic rather than a cheerleader, you should be able to say, these are things that we are anticipating you asking, and here's the information to you. John, last comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, by way of adding a little perspective, I mean, we do have the precedent of having a town energy office and an employed energy coordinator that speaks to the question that the town has taken the need to shift our energy usage patterns very, very seriously. In the past, we have a huge contract with Honeywell, as you know, which is supposed to render our buildings X, Y, Z so much more efficient over a period of time. There are indications that it does from my sitting in on some of the Energy Committee meetings. And the Finance Committee presented a report to the town representatives in March, which included a recommendation that the town get more involved in the production of renewable energy. And the town reps did not act on that recommendation or any of our recommendations individually, but the report was generally well received. I think it's in the spirit of urgency that's broadly felt that the town very, very carefully look at how it can be a catalyst by expressing its wishes as a consumer in the field of electricity. I think, as Chris Chapman spoke to, I think there are also extraordinary opportunities here that may not only benefit the town and its bottom line, but also benefit the local economy. Today I attended a solar summit that was put on by Green Mountain Power, which, as a result of the merger between Green Mountain Power and CVPS, has promised to make Rutland the solar city, and today they're talking about making Rutland the solar capital of the Northeast. So there's a lot of new things happening here that the town, I believe, should be looking very, very carefully at and move in a considered way toward making a reality. I am a big fan of exploring possibilities, and what I saw the folks on the Energy Committee doing was exploring possibilities and not really bringing out any kind of proposal that would be considered to be any sort of conflict or any kind of insider deal or anything like that. I think anybody that's thinking in those terms should rethink them, what they're talking about here. There's a sense of urgency in the conversion to renewable, energy. Bill McKibben is a noted Vermont author who's written on this topic many times. He's going to be speaking in Amherst on September 7th, and there's a group of people that are getting together in Amherst after that to bring out a Climate Action Now plan that would try to accelerate the movement toward renewable energy because of the urgency of global warming and climate change. I hope the town is very, very serious about this, each of us as individuals. I hope we factor it into our thinking, think about it rationally, and also think about it with things like Irene in mind, because some people say that Hurricane Irene, the tropical storm Irene, which caused so much damage here, is partly a result of vicissitudes and wide variations in weather that are part of this trend toward climate change. I'd like to pass a book around to the select board. This is written by Greg Paul, who's part of ACORN, the energy committee, or rather an energy cooperative in Middlebury. And they've just erected their first 150 kilowatt solar array, which is the same size that there was speculation we might be able to do here. And this is called Power from the People. This is hot off the presses. Power from the People: How to Organize, Finance, and Launch Local Energy Projects. And there's a very, very moving endorsement by Bill McKibben on here. Talk about down and dirty, or rather down and clean. Here's the actual useful detail on how to do the stuff that really needs doing. Read it and get to work. And this is really the sweet spot, I think, for renewable energy is community projects. And I hope the town might consider very, very carefully how it can be a catalyst in moving these things along. Possibly even as I think I heard one of you say, bring in a consultant, somebody that really gives you the dope on these kinds of agreements, tells you exactly what can be done, what are the pros and cons, and try to move things along, because I think it's high time that we do see more solar projects. And there's another side of the question of whether they're sightly or not. I would be very proud to see my town be part of a highly visible solar array to show that we are on the bandwagon to reverse climate change and global warming.
Thank you.
Could I just briefly respond to David's comment about the Honeywell project? There have been some very legitimate concerns about whether the town is saving money from that project, and the Energy Committee has done some research into that question, and we have some information that we would be happy to share with the board.
Yes, please.
We'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, get that information to us. I'm somewhat disappointed in that whole
sees what we're paying.
In that whole process.
Right. It is saving the town money, and we can show you the details. It's also costing a lot every month, as you know.
Right.
And we've done analysis comparing those two that we can share with you.
Very good.
So,
last comment, though?
well, just because we still haven't answered the question, and I think the answer is anything that anybody's proposing that's some sort of deal really needs to go to the town manager's office. That's that's where that goes.
They brought it.
Yeah,
And I said
think
the
my
board
response
wouldn't be
is-
able to take action that quickly.
Yeah, the municipal body doesn't work as quickly
No.
as the private sector.
We understand completely.
That's understood.
You've been here before, so you know that.
Right. I think that, what we said is sort of guidance is sort of, there's interest among the committee to answer the kind of questions you've brought up. And, the devil's in the details. It has to do with the company, the strength of the company that's proposing a system. It has to do with the price. It has to do with all that kind of thing. And so the question is there interest in pursuing this more and seeing if this, could potentially pan out? Is this something that we should be spending our energy on? What's our role in doing that? Do we immediately just hand them over when they're presented to us to you and stay out of it? We're sort of looking for guidance here.
I would believe that you're the entity that they should be talking to. You've certainly heard the concerns. Now, telling you to pursue this, which I think that you should, doesn't guarantee that you'll get the votes to pursue this further down the road. I think that the way that this body has functioned is that it looks for information to disseminate, and there have been some good questions raised here this evening. Questions that we would get if you weren't here from the public. In terms of anything that we do, we get those questions. It doesn't make any difference whether it's this project or the Route 30 project or whatever, we get questions. So we're looking to you as a committee appointed by us, and this is really something that you're bringing to us, so we need you. We don't have the time to go out and do the research that's required to really say, okay, yeah, this is something I think we can totally get behind, and then bring it forward. Christopher?
Yeah, I agree that you folks, with your interests and with the skills that you've accreted, are really the people to be looking at this. And as I said before, it is tantalizing to think of the opportunities here. But I would like very much to know that you have asked some really tough questions. For example, nobody's said a word about how do these arrays depreciate? What if everything that you've been talking to us about assumes that the arrays generate consistently. That is, they don't wear out. But in the contract that I have seen, I've seen a contract, and it talks about unknown costs, like after the expected lifetime of these items, there is a degeneration of the capabilities of the arrays, and then you've got some expenses having to do with getting that capability back. It's not a depreciation financially; it's a depreciation physically. Just starting there, identify your assumptions, and ask all the tough questions. What can go wrong here? Because I think you can assume that it would. Remember when electricity was invented, and we had electricity introduced, from local generation, Consolidated Edison. There was a huge amount of overbuilding and bankruptcy. Same with the railroad. Huge amount of overbuilding and bankruptcy because of unknown costs and unknown dynamics that were discovered the hard way. Also, ask the question, please, about the economy of scale of these. Notice that I think there's a reason that there's been so much consolidation in the utility industry, that scale is very important to competitiveness. And we're talking basically about, even large though an array would be, relative to what an individual does on his or her house, it's still not all that large. There still is a large amount of investment that has to be done that isn't even viable without tax credits, which makes me suspicious. If you can't build something and make it work without government assistance, are you really getting something that is viable long term? Please, just ask the hard questions.
If I can just respond quickly. I think, again, we need to separate a power purchase agreement versus owning a system. If you're owning a system, then all these things that you're talking about are real issues. The things that can go wrong with a power purchase agreement are you're fixing a price. Is that a good price or not? That's the issue. The other thing that could go wrong is the company producing the power could go bankrupt, in which case you stop buying that electricity. A power purchase agreement is much simpler than owning a system. So I just want to sort of separate those. And that's why we sort of brought forward the idea of a power purchase agreement, because I think it's much simpler to understand, and that'll then give the town time to think about whether it wants to own it or not, or maybe it never wants to go there. That's on the table. So that's the quick response.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We've given you some direction, and
yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Thank you for bringing it forward.
All right, thanks.
Okay, we have one more item here. Actually, to appoint a committee member.
Right, yeah.
To request the appointment of Gary Stroud to the Town Energy Committee. I will accept the motion.
I move to appoint Gary Stroud to the Town Energy Committee.
All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? 5-0. Okay.
Are we setting the social
Setting a work session. I don't think that we. Do you want to do this next week, or do you want to wait until after Labor Day?
after Labor Day?
Okay.
Yeah, you got to.
Yeah, this is.
Yeah.
When is our first meeting in September?
Actually, our
September
first meeting
4th.
is September 4th,
Can we
Tuesday.
talk about it on September 4th then, or we want to lock in?
Yeah.
Okay, we can check your calendars. So I'd be looking at doing that probably the following week,
11th?
somewhere around 10, 11, 12, 13.
Sure. 10
Okay.
or 11, I'm free, yeah.
Okay, so we will put that on the agenda to set a meeting
Oh, sure.
at our September.
It would have to be Monday or Tuesday of that week, because I'm out of town Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Okay. Monday or Tuesday,
No,
so
it's the family
try to
service
clear your
meeting.
schedules for a Monday, Tuesday meeting. Thank you very much, you're free to go.
And thank you, guys.
Meetings.
On Wednesday, August 22nd at 6 p.m., the Planning Commission is holding an info session at the West Brattleboro Fire Station. This Thursday, August 23rd, as mentioned earlier, at 5:30 p.m., Connect VT is holding a Target Community Tour public meeting here in the Select Board meeting room. On Monday, the 27th, 3 meetings at 5:30 p.m. The Citizens Police Communications Committee is holding a meeting in the Brooks Memorial Library Community Room. At 6 p.m., the Planning Commission is meeting here in the Select Board meeting room. Also at 6 p.m., the West River Park meeting is happening in the Gibson-Aiken Conference Room. Tuesday, the 28th of August at 8:30 a.m., the Traffic Safety Committee is meeting here in the Select Board meeting room. 4:30 p.m., the Finance Committee is meeting in the Select Board meeting room. And at 5:15, the Conservation Commission is meeting in the Hannah Cosman room. Reminding people that on Monday, September 3rd, town offices are closed for Labor Day. Tuesday, September 4th at 6:15 p.m., the Select Board meeting is the next regularly held Select Board meeting here in the Select Board meeting room. Also want to remind people that primary elections are happening right now and early voting, with also the town clerk's office being open this Saturday, August 25th from 9 a.m. to noon for those wishing to vote early. The Brattleboro Clerk's Office will be closed Tuesday, August 28th on Election Day, but the polls will be open for voting at the BUHS gym on Election Day from 9 a.m. until 7 p.m. There are contested elections, so people please go and vote, and I move to adjourn.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? 5-0. Thank you. Thank you, BCTV.
Okay, guys, we have signatures we need on this contract.
I thought you wanted to. Yes, I thought you want. Do you want to give them an opportunity to look at it? They're not going to.
All right.
Have a chance. You can talk to them. 5 people are going to have a chance to.